of the Proche automatic fish feeder. On the box, it's labeled Lundra. I think this is another case of Chinese product trying to imitate a Western product. Lundra or Lunda kind of sounds like London, but it's made in China. In any case, I had 2 of these feeders, and they're working really well for my aquariums. And I have 2 other aquariums set up, and I thought, well, I'm going to set them up too, because even though you don't always need them, they're convenient. The fish get fed the same time every day. If you go on vacation, no big deal. You can use it, not use it, whatever. Any case, let me show you how this works. So this one's brand new in the box, and it comes with batteries, a mounting platform, directions manual, and the feeder. So we'll take the feeder out of its plastic wrapping. And this is double-sided tape as an option for mounting. We'll come back to that in a minute. So, to get a general idea of the feeder, you've got an LCD panel, you've got 4 buttons, you've got the chamber that holds the food, and a slide that you can move open or close to regulate the amount of food released at each feeding. So, first thing we need to do is put the batteries in the feeder. So the battery compartment, let's take this thing off so we don't break it. So I'm just going to pull this out. You can see this is the part that holds the food, and this is the part that adjusts the amount of food that's released. You slide that open to widen the openings. You slide it closed to narrow them. I'm removing this label here because I don't want that interfering with the movement of the feeder. It's a little bit of gummy stuff that was sticking that label to the feeder. Just taking that off. Now the batteries are on the end opposite to this axle that turns the feeder. So I'm going to open the battery compartment so you can see inside, and it labels which way the batteries go. So let's get the batteries out of their pack. So the battery that is furthest in this direction has the positive end facing up, and the other battery goes the other way. So there are the batteries in there. And now I'm just going to put this back on, and you just press it in place. You want to make sure you get these 2 cleat things over the edge, otherwise it won't snap in. So it's snapped in. You can now see that the LCD is active. And we can go ahead and start programming that. So the first thing you want to do is program the time. So what time you got on your, well, let's see. Let me just take a peek at the microwave. 3:51. Okay. So 3:51 on a 12-hour clock, but this uses military time. So 3:51, so we got 15:51. So I'm just going to press set, which is the right button here. The hour thing starts flashing, and then I press up and hold it. I want 15. Okay, and then I hit set again to move it over to the minutes. Press the plus to get to 51. Now it's probably about 52, so I'll keep going until I hit 52. And then I press set again, and the time of day is now set. Now the next thing you want to do, you have up to 4 feedings a day that you can program. So to get to them, you press the mode button, which is the button towards the left. So I'm going to press that once, and you see it's gone 0, and the number 1 there. So this is the first of 4 feeding times. So I want this to go off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, military time, that's 1700. So I'm going to press the set button. The hour is flashing. I go to 17. And I don't, if I press set again, it's going to go to minutes. You see the minutes flashing, but I don't want it at 5:10 or 5:20. I just want it at 5 o'clock. So I'm going to leave that at 0. I'm going to press set one more time. Now, if I press mode again, it's going to go to feeding time 2. So, for example, let's say I wanted another feeding earlier in the day. Let's say I wanted one at 12 noon. So I'll press set again. The hour's flashing. I press the up. Keep going to 12. Okay, let's say I want it 12:10, just for the hell of it. So, same thing. Okay, now if I go to, let's say I only want 2 feedings during the day. Then I press mode again, 3, I leave it blank. I press mode again, 4, I leave it blank. And when I hit this again, I'm back to time. And you'll see that there's a 1 and a 2 that are displaying above, and that means I've programmed feeding times 1 and 2. The others are blank. Now let's say, geez, I no longer want the second feeding time. I only want it to come on at 5 o'clock. So to delete a time, I go back to mode. This is the first feeding time, 1700. I'm going to hit mode again to go to the second feeding time. This is the one I want to delete. All I have to do is hit the middle button, plus, and it erases the settings. And I can reprogram it and put another time in there. But in this case, I decided I only want 1 feeding time, so I'm going to leave that blank. And I just press mode again to cycle through all the settings until I come back to time. Now you see only the 1 is showing because there's only 1 feeding time programmed. So I could, again, I could program up to 4 separate feeding times or 1, whatever I want, at independent times. Okay, so this is programmed right now to come on every day at 5 o'clock. And what it will do is, I'm going to, well, let me just show you this for a second. This is the lid that for the container of food. So you'll take your fish food. It could be pellets or granular food or fish flakes or whatever. You pour it in there. You put the lid back on. And then you match up the shape of the axle receiver here with the axle here. And you just put them together and push it in. And then you also have this large button at the top. It says M. That's for manual feeding. If you wanted to manually trigger a feeding cycle, you just press that. So just to show you how this thing works, I'm going to press this, and the thing just rotates 360 degrees. When it's 180 degrees, the opening's at the bottom, and the food falls out. And that's what's going to happen at 5 o'clock every day, or however many times you set it to go off each day. Okay, so now you have different mounting options. My favorite mounting option is just set it down on top of something. Make sure that this thing's going to come over some opening in the tank and drop the food in that opening. There's nothing to that. You just make sure it's positioned correctly. This thing will not walk. It's not going to move around. It's going to stay where you put it. So that's working fine for me. I could take the double-sided tape and put one side on the bottom here, like so, and then tape the second side onto the cover of a fish tank and position it such that it will, whoops, hit the button by mistake, so it'll drop the food in the right area. So that's one way to do it. I've taken, and I'll show you later, a piece of Velcro. And I've done the same. Instead of double-sided tape, I put a piece of Velcro here, mated with a piece of Velcro on a tank cover, and positioned it with the same idea. And then they give you this mounting plate, which has 2 screws in the side, and this is to put on the side of the fish tank or back. So you loosen the screws, so, and then you put that over the side of the tank, so it's resting there, and then you clamp it tight onto the side of the tank. And then this thing, okay, you got to be careful because it only goes one way here. It's a very tight fit, and I'm not going to do it right now, but you have to push this in tight, and this snaps in there, and then that holds it in position over the tank, over the side of the tank, usually in the back. Most tanks that have a lid have a glass cover and then a plastic back strip. So you would cut out a hole in the plastic back strip over which this would hang and drop the food. So the food would drop into the tank rather on top of the tank lid. Let's pause here. Okay. So this is my reef tank, which obviously the glass needs cleaning. But forgetting that for the moment, you can see where I've taken a piece of foam, plastic foam. I use this for building model airplanes, but I needed something. I didn't want to cut a hole in the glass, so I used this strip of foam, cut a hole in the foam over which the feeder sits. So when it turns, it drops the food into the hole. You can see that I've taken a small thin piece of plywood, again used for model airplanes, a super thin plywood with Velcro strips that mate with the bottom of the feeder. This replaces that double-sided adhesive tape. So this is another way of mounting the feeder over a tank. For the longest while, I was thinking, how the hell am I going to use this feeder on this tank with the way it is, with the glass and the light fixture and all? And this is the solution that I came across. And well, it works. Okay, let's pause here. Okay, so on the planted aquarium, you can see how I positioned the feeder over an opening in the back plate. I have it turned, it's not centered over it because this does not drop it directly center as you might expect. It drops it a little to the right. So I have to angle it a little over the left part in order to center where the food actually drops. Another thing I want to point out is it's tricky on deciding how big to make the holes. On this feeder and on the feeder over the reef tank, I had to cut. You can see that there's like a lattice here, a crisscross of bars over the opening to the feeder. And with the flake food I was using, the flakes were so large, they were not enough was coming through. These little grids, even when the thing was fully open, were blocking the flow of the flakes out of the feeder. So what I ended up doing was taking a sharp hobby knife and removing those bars to make the opening wide, unobstructed by those bars. And then I would adjust this thing back and forth to adjust the size of the opening, but at least the bars were allowing the larger flakes to get through. I'm not sure if I'll do that on the two new feeders I got. I'll see. Now, one thing you want to do is, in order to know whether you're dropping the right amount of food is, you can put the feeder over like a paper plate like this. Let's see. And just push the button and see how much comes out. So that's how much that came out. And then you can decide, well, is that enough? And then you can slide it open wider or narrower, or feed, increase the number of times per day it's dispensing the feeding. So these are your adjustments available. But this, you can see where I cut the bars off of that feeder. There are no bars there like there are here. Okay. Even though I triggered a separate manual feeding there, that will not take the place of the program feeding. It's still going to go off at its program time. All right. So I'm now going to put some food inside this new feeder. And then we'll mount it on we'll test the amount of food that's coming out. This is marine flakes. I've got this doubly sealed to keep it fresh because it's a pretty big container. And I don't want the stuff going stale before it's time. So we'll pour in some. You can see how large these flakes are, and why they would have difficulty getting through the openings with those that lattice, that crossbar there. These are really big flakes, but I'll try it first without the crossbars cut out to see if it's enough. All right, so I've pretty much filled the feeder up. And I'll put the cap back on. And then I'll mate the axle with its receptacle here. Push it on. And now, let's test it. And see, I've got it wide open now. Let's see how much comes out. And, that,
yeah, but they look like small flakes.
they are small flakes, and that's fine. And I think it once a day. I think I'll start with that. Try it again?
Yeah.
What do you think will happen this time?
Maybe you got some like small flakes that come through the first time, but now that they're gone.
Okay. I think it'll be the same. And I think eventually those big flakes are going to break apart from tumbling around in there. See?
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So you can see it's pretty consistent from feeding to feeding. Now I'm only feeding one fish here. It's a little blue damsel I've got in this small reef tank. So I don't want to stuff him. So basically all I have to do for this one is set it down on the cover, make sure that the holes are centered over the opening. There's no back plate in this section. The back plate is on the other side, and so when this goes off at 5 o'clock, it'll drop right in there. So that tank's set. Whoops. Okay, you can pause it here. So now this tank, I took some overgrown pearlweed from the planted tank, and I filled up the top section of this small 10-gallon tank, and there are a couple of swordfish. You can see the male in the back there underneath. Female, I don't know, probably hiding somewhere. In any case, I'm going to attempt to breed this pair of swordtails. And if you look back at here, you'll see a little opening in the back plate between the filter and the plastic back strip. So all I'm going to do is set this feeder down right here and center it. I'm going to turn it a little bit angled this way, because remember, it doesn't drop straight in the center. It drops a little to the right.
So you're angling it towards the back.
I'm angling it towards the back so the food actually falls in the hole. And so that's that. So basically, I mean, this is how I've mounted these 4 feeders. You know, if I want to go on vacation for a month, the fish are going to be happy. They're going to be fed. And, your friend Dan, he says, well, why would you want that? I mean, I like to feed my fish. I like to watch them come and...
For the vacations.
And I said, well, maybe you want to feed your fish twice a day, and here you can maybe set it to feed them automatically once a day, and you can feed them yourself the second time. And if you miss a few days, well, it's not like they're going to starve. They'll get something, And if you're going to be gone, well, you can just increase the number of feedings per day.
Right. Just set it up for a vacation.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope you found this review of the Proche automatic fish feeder useful. Thanks.